What is the image of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? What is the image of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? What is the image of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? What is the image of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? What is the image of Mother Teresa of Calcutta? A woman dedicated to religious life, 100% awakened in her. At the age of 12, the vocation of a missionary. As a very young girl, she entered the Marian congregation of the Daughters of Mary, a place where she began and learned various assistance activities with the most needy. Shortly after turning 18 and having already actively participated in various churches and convents, she went with a friend from the Loreto Abbey, belonging to the Catholic religious congregation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in Ireland. This was a watershed moment in her life, because she would never see her mother or sister again. After taking her vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience as a nun, on May 24th of the year 31, she was given permission to move to St. Mary's College in Entilly, east of Calcutta. Agnes decided to attend the Congress of St. Mary in Entilly, east of Calcutta around this time. She was called by the name that would go down in history, that is, the one we know, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. In 1937, and after making her solemn vows while teaching at the Loreto Convent School, she worked for almost 20 years as a history and geography teacher, until in 1944, thanks to the support of the community, she became the director of the institution. Now, while she enjoyed the company and the teaching work she carried out at the place, she was increasingly impressed and disturbed by the extreme poverty that prevailed in Calcutta, which she saw day after day. Episodes like the famine of '43 in Bengal not only caused great misery and death in the city, but also brought about some political changes that would help Mother Teresa find her life's calling. On September 11, 1946, the nun experienced what many years later she would describe as the call within the call. That is, having heard the voice of God asking her to use her compassion, her charity, and her life for the good of others, especially for those most in need. After receiving basic medical training in Paris, thanks to the financial support of an Indian Catholic businessman, she now began her new stage of altruism among the poor. In 1948, with tasks such as teaching them to read, preparing food in community centers, and providing first aid. In early 1949, she joined a group of young women and helped lay the foundations of a new religious community whose sole purpose was to help the poorest of the poor. The woman wrote in her personal diary that she came to doubt the life mission that God had entrusted to her, and that due to the difficulties she had experienced in her first year of work with the needy, she was tempted to return to her old life in the convent. By 1950, the Holy See gave her permission to form her new congregation, which was called the Missionaries of Charity. And although initially it only had 13 members in Calcutta, over time it came to have more than 4,000 members all over the world. This congregation aimed to provide care for refugees, the poor, the elderly, the homeless, victims of epidemics, famines, and even floods. With this, the first home for the dying was also opened in Calcutta. After great public acceptance and receiving help from various Indian officials who were impressed with the nuns' intentions, an abandoned Hindu temple was converted to the Kaligat Dying Home. This place housed all those in need or seeking medical attention, and they were offered the opportunity to die with dignity, according to the rituals of their faith. Already in the year 55, and due to the increase in abandoned children, she now opened the institution Home of the Child of the Immaculate Heart, a place that helped thousands of children find a second chance in life. By 1968, and with a public image of a religious woman dedicated to God, Mother Teresa had opened establishments in many parts of the globe, from Rome, Tanzania, Austria, Venezuela, Asia, Africa, Europe, and even in the United States. Between March 26 and December 16 of 1971, the Bangladesh Liberation War took place. That is, the military confrontation between India and Pakistan, in which moral outrages occurred to a large part of the civilian population, especially women, from abuses by soldiers of both nations, cold-blooded murders and infanticides. So, Mother Teresa, along with her religious sisters, in an attempt to help, established places to provide aid and give them the necessary care. Throughout the 80s, she tried to expand the presence of her organizations in countries with communist ideas and which refused to accept help. For instance, she visited the Soviet Republic of Armenia after the earthquake that occurred in Spitak in 1988 and offered to provide support. In addition, he also traveled to Ethiopia and Chernobyl, for which he was awarded the Gold Medal of the Soviet Peace Committee. It should be clarified that the Soviet Union was considered an atheist nation at that time. With such presence and the media admiration of everyone, by 1996, Teresa was already running approximately 517 missions in more than 100 countries. And as the years went by, it seemed that her legend was only destined to grow and grow more and more. The nuns' helpers went from being 13 to thousands, collaborating in more than 540 work centers around the world. But time spares no one and eventually catches up with each and every one of us. Over the years, her health was deteriorating more and more at an accelerated pace. For instance, in the year 83, she suffered a heart attack in Rome during one of her visits to the Vatican. After a second attack in 89, it was required that the nun receive an artificial pacemaker. Later, or finally in 93, she was admitted to the United Nations hospital in an emergency due to a pulmonary congestion that caused her a high fever. By March 13th of 97, due to so many health issues, she decided to resign as head of the Missionaries of Charity. Thus, Mother Teresa of Calcutta passed away on September 5th of that same year at the age of 87 due to a heart attack. The government of India granted her the great honor of a state funeral, and as part of this, what is it called? Her what? Her coffin was transported all over the city in the same carriage that carried the remains of Mahatma Gandhi and other figures of this caliber, just to give you an idea. As you could see in this brief introduction I just gave you about her biography, the impact she made all over the world is easy to understand. But having said all this, would anyone dare to doubt one of the most influential women of the 20th century? Well, the problem, as I mentioned at the beginning, is that in the mid-90s, this woman's credibility began to crumble after several accusations. According to an article published by Robin Fox, the main editor of the medical journal The Lancelot, after visiting the hospices in Calcutta in '94, he claimed that he could not find a single person with basic medical knowledge. This clearly caused patients to be diagnosed and treated incorrectly, in addition to being crowded into poorly qualified and, well, unsanitary stays. And as if that wasn't enough, Fox also wrote that it was common to see terminally ill patients mixed with patients with contagious diseases, and with patients whose diagnostic treatments did not go beyond a simple flu. Interestingly, these claims were backed up 2 years later by Mary London, a highly respected researcher, in the British Medical Journal, in addition to volunteering for the nuns' congregation in Calcutta. She not only confirmed what Fox mentioned, but described a series of aberrant practices by the congregation and by the supposed doctors. Things like the reuse of hypodermic needles on various patients, the denial of painkillers, and the horrible sanitary conditions of the hospices. In addition to this, some time later, in 2013, in a highly exhaustive magazine that covered 96% of the reading on Mother Teresa, a group of scholars from the University of Montreal interested in unveiling the truth reinforced the previous criticism, detailing, among other things, the missionary practice of simply caring for the sick by glorifying their suffering instead of relieving them. Apart from her dubious political contacts, her suspicious management of the huge sums of money she received, and her excessively dogmatic views in relation to abortion, contraception, and divorce. When these criticisms reached various media outlets, they began to be observed, and the Vatican's motivations for ignoring the massive attacks began to be questioned. So the study concluded that the sacred image of Mother Teresa, which does not withstand the analysis of the facts, was constructed, and that her beatification was orchestrated by an effective media relations campaign designed by the Catholic convert and anti-abortion BBC journalist, Malcolm Muggeridge. As you heard at the beginning of the video, one of the biggest detractors of the nun was the British journalist and writer Christopher Hitchens, who also coined the nickname of the Angel of Hell, obviously referring to Mother Teresa.
According to Hitchens, the mother told all her order members that they secretly had to baptize terminal patients. All this without taking into account the religion they professed.
Susan Shields, a former member of the Missionaries of Charity, writes the following. The sisters were forced to ask patients in danger of death if they wanted a ticket to heaven. Immediately afterwards, if the answer was affirmative, a baptism was performed quickly. But if this was not the case, the sister had to pretend that she was refreshing the patient's head with a damp cloth, while in reality she was baptizing him, saying the necessary words in a low voice. The secret was important, so that it was not known that Mother Teresa's sisters were baptizing Hindus and Muslims without their consent, which, although this may seem like something of little importance, what is striking is the lack of tolerance towards other religions and the mentality of imposing Christianity in the last moments of a person. In addition, Hitchens described the religious woman as an enthusiast of poverty, even though she used to associate with somewhat unethical and quite questionable figures. For example, although the mother claimed that she did not do or engage in politics, she acknowledged Francisco Duvalier, better known as Papa Doc, and his son, John Cloud, known as Baby Doc, one of the worst dictators of the 20th century whose regime plunged Haiti into tragedy. From this character, she received the Haitian Legion of Honor and apparently established a very good friendship. Another example is that among her wealthy acquaintances was the name of Charles Keating, known by many as the King of Junk Bonds. In the late 80s, this man defrauded $3 billion from 23,000 investors in what is considered one of the most notorious financial scandals in the United States. As you might deduce, Keating had donated millions of dollars to Mother Teresa, and it is also known that on the occasions when the religious woman visited North America, he generously offered to lend her about 10 private jets. When Keating was arrested, Teresa took on the task of interceding for him, sending a letter to the judge in charge of the investigation, in which she mentioned the following. I know nothing about Charles Keating's business, but I know he has been generous to God's poor. Keating's convictions were dismissed on appeal, as was a summary trial. After several months of court sessions, he pleaded guilty to 4 counts of wire fraud and bankruptcy, and was sentenced to prison. Charles Keating, another analyst of Mother Teresa's works and life, mentions that the image of the nun as a helper of the poor is one of the worst representations she can have, and accuses her of taking advantage of this. According to her fundamentalist view of religion and faith, misery and suffering are experiences that everyone must go through and must accept as part of divine providence to earn heaven. This is what she made the injured believe in the Bhopal disaster in India, which occurred on December 3, 1984. What happened was that there was a leak in the Union Carbide pesticide factory, caused the unfortunate death of more than 12,000 people, and injured another 600,000 driven by reasons still unknown, but with suspicions that there were personal interests. Quite questionable. Mother Teresa went to the affected area with the idea of offering comfort to the victims. The problem was that she only limited herself to telling them to forgive the men responsible, that it had to be that way to purify their heart and leave the evil behind. Such was the insistence of Mother Teresa that in the end many of the affected made the decision not to take legal action against the company. That is, thanks to the advice and words of the nun, one of the greatest tragedies in the history of India went almost unpunished. And I say almost unpunished because the only thing that happened was that 8 company workers were sentenced to 2 years in prison and to pay ridiculous fines of approximately between 8,000 to 10,000 euros. In this aspect, where the true work of the missionary can be said to be dark, it is impossible to give a number or accurately calculate how much money the congregation managed to accumulate over the years. And thanks to the various associations and powerful politicians who selflessly donated what is suspected to be millions. When the weekly Lehman Stern tried to inquire about the numbers, the Indian government flatly refused to provide the data, claiming it was highly confidential information. On the other hand, the British Treasury also tried, and this time it was the Vatican Bank, which incidentally is the institution to which the community's funds were transferred after the death of their leader, that opposed revealing such information. According to the words of a former worker of the order, and whose quote you can find in the book The Club of the Despicable, the figure of the Missionaries of Charity alone in the United States amounts to $50 million. It is due to these kinds of statements from former workers that it has been possible little by little to uncover the other side of the coin of Mother Teresa that no one even wants to hear. It is in statements like that of Colette Livermore in her book titled Hope Endures, Living Mother Teresa that we can observe how the qualification of the religious woman as a theologian of suffering is repeated. According to this author, the nun's life philosophy was that God loved the weak and the poor because they are proof that good exists in man. Just like this, there are dozens of similar testimonies, and in which the majority agree that the Albanians' fervent effort to give suffering a halo of romanticism is actually a way of taking advantage of others' pain. Another of the most controversial examples was when the Spanish journalist José Bustamante transcribed in 1995 a conversation between the mother and a terminally ill cancer patient who was agonizing in one of his facilities. "You're suffering like Christ on the cross, so Jesus must be kissing you." To which this sick person responded, "Please, mother, tell him to stop kissing me." The estimated number is known thanks to a video that I'm going to be leaving here, that in private, with a video, she converted more than 29,000 people to Christianity throughout her life. And also one of the criticisms she suffered the most was because of this same interview. She mentioned that it's so beautiful to see people die with so much joy. Some time ago. Finally, another of the controversial events surrounding her story is that Mother Teresa was canonized 19 years after her death on September 5, 2016. For this, 2 approved miracles were necessary, one for beatification and another for canonization. One of them was the almost inexplicable healing of an Indian woman of animist religion, Monica Bursa, a 34-year-old housewife who suffered from a tumor in the abdomen. She miraculously healed in '98, and according to several sources close to the case, it was all a lie. Apparently, the tumor was not due to a disease like cancer but tuberculosis, and she was cured because she was diagnosed and treated in the hospital. All this and more is what has been documented since the nun's death, and even though the critics, staunch of this woman, know that there are still few who are willing to listen to the other side of the coin, they believe it is only a matter of time before the so-clean image of this religious woman is gradually set aside. If you are still interested in this topic, I recommend you read the books of the authors exposed here in this video, as well as the Hell's Angel documentary by researcher Christopher Hitchens, but in the end, Even though I make this video for you, it's up to you whether to believe or not believe in what this woman was in life. If you liked this video, don't forget to follow me on my social networks. And remember that you can listen to the uncensored audios on Spotify and all audio platforms, and see you tomorrow.